Hello again. Here we are, Owen and me, Ian. We're here to help you do a little bit more learning about the history of Downton. Now we've got a special job to do today. We're going to go back out around the village, but we're going to look at the jobs that people used to do. So we're calling it our walk around Downton, looking at Downton at Work. Downton at Work in the past is what we're looking for today. So I'm going to take special places, and at each one of those places I'm going to tell you the story of somebody who worked there years and years and years ago in the past. So we're learning about Downton at Work. We're going to go up to where the station was and find out about Harry. Then we're going to come down to the old tannery and find out about Les. Then we're going across the road to the mills to find out about Steve and his work. And then we're coming back down to the middle of the village here to Fairfield House, and we're going to find out about Fred. He was only 10 years old, but he had 7 jobs. Then we're going to go down the borough and find out what Daisy did to earn money, and then we're going to finish by walking down to Wick Farm and finding out about Esther, who worked at Wick Farm 100 years ago. Are you ready to go? I want you to do a job for me when we're walking around, when we're finding out about these people. I want you to think. Compare. Compare means, is it the same as today, or is it different? What are the differences? What are the similarities between life today and life in the past in Downton? Are you ready? Let's go. Well, here we are at Downton Station. Downton train station. Yep. But there's no station here. Why is that? Well, we're going to find out because we're going to hear the story of Harry, the last station master at Downton. We're going to have a little look at where the railway line was, so we can actually see down this footpath there's a concrete wall on the right that I think the railway was above. That was an embankment. So the railway went through Downton. It came from the north, from Salisbury, and it came through, right through here, and the station was here before we get to Lode Hill. We've seen before the sign that says sidings. That means that there were places for trains to come away from the main line and rest. The station was in here, and we're going to hear the story of Harry, whose job it was to look after the station. So he worked here for a long time, and for a while, when it was built, the station was busy. People went up the line to Salisbury, maybe to go into town, to shop, maybe to the market. Children went to school on the train, and they also got on the train here at the station to go south, towards South Moors, where it joins up with the line to Bournemouth, so people could go to the seaside on the train from Downton. It was a busy place. Materials were also brought into this station, so things like coal were important. People used coal to keep themselves warm, keep their fires going. Coal, there was a coal yard here, and the hides, the cow skins for the tannery, they were brought in by train sometimes as well, and then taken down to the tannery from here. Well, poor old Harry, he had a job for a long time here, and he lived in a house on the road, but in the end, people said to him, there's not enough people using the trains, we're going to close the line down. That was sad for Harry, because by the time he finished, he was doing everything. He opened the station up in the morning, he sold the tickets, he was on the platform with his flags and his whistle. He was a porter as well. He was helping people with luggage. He even had to let the pigeons go. When the pigeons arrived in their baskets for a pigeon race, he let the pigeons go. So he did everything at the station at the end. But in the end, sadly, his job wasn't needed anymore. The line was closed down, like many other lines across the country. So Harry, the station master, his job was here, and there aren't many clues left. But we have seen that one, the sidings road sign. Now, we want you to do some comparing. What was life like? What is life like now? So nobody in Downton can catch a train here now, but people do still travel on trains, don't they? But not from Downton. And the railway line, the tunnel that way has been filled in. The bridge that way over the River Avon, that's been knocked down. But there are some signs of the railway, but not many. I wonder if some people think that in the future a railway line should open again. We've come down the hill from the station to the tannery, the old tannery. One of the biggest buildings in the village, and once it was one of the biggest employers. That meant that a lot of people from Downton came to work here. Up to 70 people worked here, and the job they were doing was taking cow skins, cow hides, cleaning them and softening them to make leather. We still use leather for shoes and for belts and for bags. In those days, 100 years ago, leather was used for all sorts of jobs. A lot of clothes were made from leather, and the leather that was made here was top quality. So Les, who worked here, was proud of his work. He came to work at the tannery, and his job was to take a long pole and hook the hides, the skins, out of one tub of chemicals, one pit full of chemicals. Some of them were very smelly, some of them were acidic, some of them were alkaline. They were strong chemicals cleaning up the leather. You had to take the hide out with his long pole, pull it out, drag it along and put it into the next pit. It was heavy, dangerous work, and Les did that for a long time. He came to work here when he was 14. One day he lost his balance and he fell into one of the pits of chemicals, and he was a lucky man because he was pulled out and he went home and he was looked after and he could go back to work, but that was so dangerous he could have died. So Les, proud of his leather, the leather went to places in the village. Some of it, there were shoemakers and saddlers. People used the leather to make saddles, but in the end, like a lot of jobs, other things came along. People started making footwear and saddlery out of plastic or synthetic materials. Not so much leather was needed, and the tannery in the end, about 50 years ago, closed down. So Les worked with the tanners here making leather in years gone by. So we've come across the road from the tannery to the mills. We already know that the mills were very important and that flour was made here and woolen cloth and paper. But I'm going to tell you the story of Steve, who worked here when they weren't making paper and they weren't making cloth and they weren't making flour. They were making something a bit different. They were making electricity. This was an electricity generating station, and they used the mill, they used the power of the water to turn a wheel, to turn a turbine, to make electricity. And it was the first electricity in Downton. So the power of the water was useful. The people at the tannery, they owned the mills. They said, if we want some electricity, we can make it using the power of the water. And they did that. They had a machine called a turbine, and they said to the parish, to the village people, would you like some electricity for street lamps? And the parish council said, yes please. To begin with, there was one lamp near the bridge, near Mill Bridge. Then there were 4, and in the end there were 20 street lamps to light the dark streets of Downton on a winter's night. There was also electricity going up to the church through the tannery. So this was a useful place. The mills were used to generate electricity. Now Steve, his job was 2 jobs. He had to look after the machinery, keep it oiled, keep an eye on it, make sure nothing clogged up the wheels, and look after the mill building. And he also had to catch eels. There were eels in the River Avon, and he could use a metal grill to put down into the water and catch the eels. If it was a good night, he got 200 eels that he caught, so he was a fisherman as well as an engineer. 200 on a good night, when the moon was low, he said, when it was a dark night. The best night ever, he got 740 eels caught here. He used to pack them up, get them up to the station and send them to London, because the people of London, they loved their jellied eels. So the eels that people ate in London, some of them came all the way from Downton Electricity Generating Station. Now I want you to think, compare, same or different. Do people make their electricity using a mill now? Well, not much, but they do in some places. They do in Scotland, they call it hydroelectric power. And it's a good way of making electricity. It's renewable. So perhaps more electricity will be made with the power of running water in the future. So let's remember, Steve, 2 jobs. He was the electricity man and he was the eel catcher. I wonder if that was a good job. So we're back here to Creel Cottage. We've been here before and we learnt that there was a local industry. People worked here to make baskets. So Gilbert Eastman, he worked here and he made baskets from pieces of willow. The willow was cut from trees along the river, and he didn't just make baskets. He made furniture, he made cradles for children, babies. He made bird cages. He was a clever, skillful man, and he learnt those skills from his family. His family had been making baskets from willow withes, willow twigs, for 200 years in this village, and they made it in other places as well. It was a big thing in Downton, the baskets made by Gilbert. Now his story is a good one because he helped to win the war. He made hampers as well, big boxes made from wickerwork, made from willow, and those boxes, those hampers, were used when people wanted to parachute in equipment over the channel to France and Europe. They put the equipment in to baskets, hampers made by Gilbert. They attached it to a parachute, dropped it out of an aeroplane, and it landed safely, because those hampers were light and strong. Baskets were light and strong. He was a clever man, Gilbert. He was very skillful. So looking at the river, I can imagine Gilbert going down his steps, keeping his willow wet, and I'm comparing, I'm thinking, do people make baskets these days? Well, they do, don't they? They don't in Downton, but we still use baskets. They're quite fashionable for holding things. We have them to store things in the home. So, and it's a good renewable source. We can cut willow each year and make things of it. So perhaps baskets are a good example of a renewable source of container. There's something worth thinking about when we compare the old and the new. So Fred, one of his jobs was at Wick Farm. But how many jobs do you think he had? He was 10 years old, he went to your school at Downton, and he had, wait for it, ready to say wow, 7 jobs. And he went to school. He had to earn a lot of money for his mum, I think, and when he was an older man he remembered all of this, all of his jobs, and he wrote about it in a letter to somebody. This is what he wrote. At the age of 10, I helped at New Court Farm, where my father worked. I milked 10 cows every morning, starting at 6 a.m. Well, that's early, isn't it? My gift for that was a lovely glass of milk from the cooler. I think he liked that. Before school also, I collected papers from the station, or probably from Harry, which my mother delivered in the village. Then I went to Fairfield House and I cleaned boots and shoes. This is all before school. After school, I collected the evening papers from the station and delivered them. Then at Fairfield House, I cleaned knives, I chopped wood, and I filled the coal scuttles. And then on a winter evening, I came to Wick Farm and I bought 10 rabbits from the shoot for 9p each, and I sold them round the village at 10p each. That was all really hard work. So Fred was a busy boy. He's a 10-year-old with, did you count, 7 jobs. Some in the morning before school, some in the evening after school. He worked hard. And that was a child, he's only 10 years old. And if we compare then and now, children of his age, 10 years old, would not be allowed to work. They wouldn't be allowed to be paid for a job until, I think these days you have to be 14. Then some people get a paper round, don't they? Like his mum and like him. So comparing differences, very different today. Children don't have to do so many jobs before and after school. You might have a few to do at home, but not paid work like Fred. So these cottages have been here for about 300 years, some a bit longer maybe, and they're where ordinary families used to live. Probably the men went out to work in the farms, on the fields, and the women were left at home to look after the home and the children, but they also had another job. Life was hard, the men working in the fields didn't always earn enough money, and the women at home had to learn another skill to earn money. So we're going to call one of those women Daisy, Downton Daisy. We'll see why in a minute. So I want you to imagine Daisy working at home. It was a cottage industry. What Daisy did was make lace. Really fine work. It was difficult. She had a cushion and pins and a bobbin with thread, and she could weave and make the thread make lace, beautiful Downton lace, which was very special. It was famous all over the country, and people, women and girls all over Downton, they made lace in their cottages and sold it to make extra money so that their family had enough money for food and to pay the rent. Girls did that as well. Girls, you'll be surprised, some of the girls were as young as 5, and they came and learnt the skill of lace making to help make money. Two of the types, the designs of lace that were made, one was called Downton Daisy and one was called Egg and Rasher. There were lots of different names, hundreds of different designs, and this lace making went on for hundreds of years. There are records going back 400 years of lace makers in Downton, and it was famous enough to be sent as a present to princes and princesses who were getting married. They had special presents made of Downton lace. So Daisy made lace in Downton. And if we do our comparing, life in the past and life now, nobody makes lace in Downton now. Well, a few people might, just as a hobby. They've kept that skill going, but they don't do it to make money. They do it as a hobby. But lace is still made, but it's made on machines that make the lace much faster. And so lace is a machine-made thing now, not a cottage industry. Our last working person, our last job at Downton is Esther. And Esther worked here at Wick Farm. When she was an older lady, someone interviewed her. They asked her questions and then wrote down her memories of working here. It's about 100 years ago now, after the First World War. This is what she remembered. I worked on the farm at Wick, starting after World War I. I learned my farming as a land girl during World War I. In the summer, we used the extra milk from the cows to make big cheeses. 80 pounds, that's over 36 kilograms. And we had to lug them about. They were heavy, 80 pounds. I kept poultry too, and sold eggs and chicken for a little extra money. Money was pretty short for everybody in those days. The dairy people where I worked were very happy. We enjoyed life. Now in the winter, I worked with the ploughing. I had a team of horses to pull the plough. It was very heavy work, but not so heavy as our cheese making. There was great rivalry, between the ploughing people and the dairy people. The horse people took their ploughing so seriously. They thought they were the cat's whiskers. They had to plough in an absolutely straight line across the field. The men thought just as much about their horses as their ploughing. They had to groom and feed them, really look after them. There were about 30 working horses on the farm in those days, and 30 working men and boys. Later on, when we'd gone over to tractors, there were 2 men only and 3 tractors. There was great change, you see. So Esther lived here and worked here for a long time. She married the farmer, and she could remember when all the farming was done with horses. 30 horses out ploughing and harvesting. And when she finished her working life, 3 tractors, 2 men. So 28 people had lost their jobs because tractors had been invented and could do the job of horses. But you can still see at Wick Farm the stables where all those horses were kept. Now there are horses living there still, but they're horses that people keep as a hobby. So Esther saw a great deal of change, and that's what we're all about. We're learning about change in history, change through time from the past to the present. So if we compare farming as it was, and most people worked on farms in the old days, with how it is now, it's very, very different. Well, here we are back at school. We've been for our walk around Downton, looking at Downton at Work. We've heard about Harry at the station, Les at the tannery, Steve at the electricity station in the mill, Gilbert at Creel Cottage, making baskets, Fred across the road at Fairfield House and up and down here to school and to Newcourt, and then Daisy, the Lacemaker, and Esther at Wick Farm. All working hard, all doing different work in Downton in the past. So thank you for listening to that, and here's a job for you. When you're at home, think, do you know any older people who might remember when things were different? Ask them, what was it like when they went to work for the first time? Was it the same as today, or were things different? Then you're using a good history skill. You're comparing the past and the present. Well done, and enjoy your history learning.